StopFake.org's two-year anniversary conference is dedicated to the phenomena of Russian propaganda and the evolution of Kremlin's tactics when it comes to influencing audience, not only in Russia, but all over the globe. As part of the conference, analysts from several countries, including Russia, are discussing ways to combat the massive propaganda machine launched by the Kremlin. Joining us now is Denis Volkov. He's a sociologist with Levada Centre. Denis, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
So let's start off with why is it so important to talk about propaganda and ways to combat it?
Well, I think speaking about Russia, it is important to understand that the state television, first of all, has very much influence on public opinion, and we can say that the Kremlin can form public opinion by the way of well, TV, first of all. And first, I think it is important to understand that nearly one half of population depend almost entirely on TV in their, when they find out news about what's going on in the country and abroad. So one half only, almost only TV. But another half have access to other sources of information. But again, I think roughly we can speak about independent news sources, independent media of high journalist standard. It's about 30% only for Russia. For Russia as a whole.
So even though you have independent media in the country, the people are still susceptible to propaganda. Why?
I think the best example is what's going on in Ukraine and how Russians understand it. We see that even people who have access to independent media and follow the news through several independent sources of information, there's still the majority of those, they prefer the official point of view than not the, alternative. For example, in the questions of whether there is or there is no troops, Russian troops in Ukraine, about Crimea, and all these topics. I mean, even the most informed people prefer official point of view rather than, others' point of view.
Not to go backwards here, but would you say that's sort of embedded with the Soviet mentality, with the old school sort of way of thinking when it comes to...
I would say, not quite. I think it's more the influence of the story itself, that official propaganda creates the image of Russia, which is benevolent country who just helps Russian-speaking population try to stop violence and so on. Other sources, yes, they somehow damage this very positive image because you have to answer very uncomfortable questions. What is Russia's role in Crimea, in eastern Ukraine, and so on? So somehow it damaged the positive image. And for example, on focus groups, people don't want to discuss question of whether there are troops or not, Russian troops in Ukraine. They just don't want to answer these questions. I would say because they have to overcome this. I mean, start asking questions, and it's very hard for people to get away with this positive image. So it's one, and the second is the whole conflict for the majority brought the feeling that Russia is a great country again. So we're a great country. We can take whatever we want. We can break rules. We can don't pay attention to criticism. So we're a great country. And this was very important for.
So would you say it's more of a either ignorance is bliss kind of mentality, or we're so great, we're awesome, so why would we listen to anybody who says otherwise?
Listening to others, it means that we are not so great, we are not so good, and there's kind of a mental block on this topic. So even people who have some knowledge, they prefer to just suppress it.
But there is internet now, there is radio and TV, of course, there's always been that, but with social media networks and online web media available 24/7, wouldn't you say people would be reading more,
Well,
finding
it
out
is
more?
not the case, but in a sense, yes. The audience of independent media is still big in big cities. In big cities, more than half of people have access to independent media. But 2/3 of Russians live outside of big cities, so it's rather small towns, villages, and so on. So there is no such wide and diverse media landscape. But what I think is necessary, that even those who have this access, who follow news on internet, on reading just newspapers like RBK, for example, or listening to Echo Moskvy or watching Dozhd, even I would say 2/3 of this audience, roughly, they prefer official point of view. And but this 1/3 critical, it is much more than in population in general. So these independent media bring some diversity and more criticism and more open-mindedness, but still I think there is some mental issues, mental blocks that stop people from inquiring, go into stories deeply. So they prefer not to go into these details.
Well, we know propaganda has always been part of Russian media for a while, but with the conflict in Ukraine, with the war in eastern Ukraine and Russia's intrusion ultimately onto this territory, it seemed to have escalated to the point where it's become absurd almost. Wouldn't you say that?
Yeah.
Don't people understand that some of the things are really not making any sense?
Again, it's a very complex issue here. That at the same time, we see that the trust in television is going down. So somehow people are a little bit tired of this, because with the start of the conflict in the beginning of 2014, it just propaganda became wartime propaganda. The same that we had during Russian-Georgian war in 2008. But then it was a matter of weeks. Now it was a matter of, 2 years almost. So very intensive broadcasting, that Ukraine was everywhere. On news became longer, 2 times longer. Several stories about Ukraine in every news piece of news program. Then it was through talk shows, through films, again, bringing up every time. So this was for a long period. Now it's becoming not so intensive. But again, people may be getting a little bit tired of it. But the fact is that though there is the trust in television is going down, the trust in the picture they provide stays high, because for a big amount of people there is no alternative at all. And again, part of those who have access to different points of view, they prefer, maybe not deliberately, but unconsciously, they prefer official picture because it's more pleasant, because it's self-elevating. Yeah.
But it's highly doubtful that official picture will change anytime soon. Wouldn't you say that Putin's regime is not going to come out one day and say, yes, we do have troops in Ukraine, yes, we have invaded a sovereign country, and yes, we've done this? That's very unlikely to happen.
Well, in a sense,
soon.
he did it. In several films, he accepted it, that Russia had presence in Crimea, troops, Russian
But I'm talking
troops,
more so in an official statement kind of way, when the president addresses his nation. Do you think that's ever going to happen?
No, of course not. But I think the change that is already there, that the story will be just abandoned, and it will be not rationalized what was going on, because interestingly, again, a lot of people were watching these programs, but more than half was saying, we don't understand what's going on. So the more people were watching, the less people understood what was going on. So it's kind of, you have the sense of this media that they create emotional stories, but do not explain, and people just don't understand. So it's rather that the story will be abandoned as it was, I mean, and people had some vague impression what was there. So they would rather forget than, change their mind about what was going on.
There's also an argument of freedom of speech. Do you hear that argument quite a bit? Do you hear the fact that it's freedom of speech and we can say whatever we want because that's the law and that's the rule? How would you say that is portrayed in Russian media, and how would you say that is presented to the public there?
Well, I would say that it's not about this story. It's more about creating the feeling there is pressure on Russia. It's not about, Russian media, that they are being banned or something. It's that there is an information war against Russia because there's sanctions, there's information war, so we have to defend ourselves. And, speaking about the access to media from abroad, there are just several percent penetration into Russian audience. So I would say that it is very hard for the West, for Western countries, make a statement.
Mr. Volkov, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
This has been a discussion on Russian propaganda machine and ways to combat it. I'm Julia Sotska. Thank you for watching Ukraine Today. Back to the news.